Okay, so Donna, you're running the slides, I guess, right? So
Yep. Tell me when.
next slide. So we had the Farm Methods Committee meeting, I think it's back in March. It was the last meeting I went to before everything got shut down and I was, stuck at my desk at home. But when we had that meeting, we talked about water systems and, there's always questions about water. So we're trying to think, what could we do for this meeting to address some of that? And I'll admit, this was kind of difficult. When I sat down, to put this together. Water systems, the whole topic of water can be very complex. So I was trying to really figure out what angle to go at with all of this. So we talk a lot about water in different venues. If you go to the Certified Milk Inspector School, if you go to the CIMI update, if you ever go to like the FDA Farm Sanitation course, we spend a lot of time talking about water and water systems, protecting the supply from contamination, making sure that, the water we're using is safe. If you go to special problems for FDA, which, if you're a regulator, you'll attend those classes. We really focus a lot on, where to violate a water system, why is it not correct? And I don't think that some of those exercises don't seem to really go from, start to finish of a system, just looking at a system overall. So, so I'm going to try to simplify that a little bit and as we go through all this. So, okay, Donna, next slide. So, first and foremost, this isn't going to be a discussion on, water conservation or anything like that. But, I think this is the way I tried to make the analogy in my mind was, if you're sitting through a food safety, a food safety talk, someone always inevitably puts up a picture of like their grandchildren or their children and they're eating an ice cream cone and they say, this is why I do what I do. And I think that when we're looking at water systems on farms, I've done a lot of work over the years, working with a lot of you folks on the farms. And, sometimes I don't think we spend as much time as we should looking at the water systems during evaluations. And you have to think about, put yourself in that mindset. Why are we so concerned about the water that we're using on these farms? And certainly, we're not in a regulatory position to, worry about how much we're using and things like that. I mean, that's for other agencies to decide. We worry about, like I said before, protecting the supply and then protecting, what we're using it for. But really, you have to put yourself into that mindset to not take water for granted. Our access to clean water in this part of the world and particularly in this part of the country is quite remarkable, really. If you go out west, and talk to some of the farmers out there and a lot of their difficulties in just having enough water, to run their operations. So I think it's something that we really need to just put that into your mind before you do an evaluation to realize why it is as important as it is. And I thought it was pretty ironic. I get food safety news every morning in my inbox at 7 a.m. and right there was a headline about, the persistent chemicals in water and how they won't go away. And it was focused on drinking water and bottled water and things like that. But I just found it very, like I said, ironic that here I am going to do this talk about evaluating a system and there right in my inbox is, the headline about, drinking water. Go ahead, Donna. So again, this, I just pulled this off the internet really, but, agriculture uses a lot of water. When I first started in the dairy industry, when I worked for, HP Hood all those years ago, and then when I was, as an inspector, I was shocked by the amount of water that just a processing facility uses in a day. I mean, it's quite incredible, really. And the amount of water that we use on the agricultural side is also incredible. I mean, we have to water all of the the crops, the animals need water. I mean, you guys listening to this know much better than I do how much water it takes to make a gallon of milk. How much water does a Holstein cow consume on a daily basis? So the other side to that too is that, agriculture doesn't always get the best rap, right? For our use of water and for being the source of contamination. When I was doing all this, I was trying to look up farms that had been affected by contamination. And when I just Google it and just, dairy farm water contaminated, and what you find is you find stories on the dairy farm contaminating groundwater for the rest of the community. So there's the bad rap there. And then on the other side of that, then you do have the stories of, groundwater contamination with things like this, this PFAS and this PFOA. We all know the stories about Hoosick Falls, right here in New York. So those are just some things to keep in mind. It's a very complex and kind of, touchy subject, I guess, if you will. Next slide now. So water use regulation, just real quick, I just wanted to point some of this stuff out. I just saw Donna's texting me, Rodney, you're unmuted. You need to have the ability to mute you. Water use regulation, just real quick, drinking water, the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, the state departments of health, county departments of health, they all handle drinking water and the treatment side of water. That's not what we get into in the grade A milk program. So, we're not going to talk about that type of stuff. In the grade A milk program, we have the FDA, which is, the pasteurized milk ordinance. Then we have, us, the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets. And then, the certified milk inspectors that are doing the field work for the co-ops and, doing the regulatory work on the farms here in New York. The other thing to keep in mind too, with the grade A milk program, we're already dealing with water that is potable or has been brought to a drinking water standard. So we're not dealing with, like I said, like the EPA or the State Department of Health deals with on the side of, worrying about water treatment and taking it from non-potable to, a status of being drinkable. We're dealing with water that's already, at that standard. Next slide. So one thing what I'm not going to do, I mentioned it earlier, that there's a lot of classes, and I'm sure most of you that are, listening to this have been in a lot of those classes where we really talk about the regulations. If you go to the new Certified Milk Inspector School, and Rodney and Chad Martin and Neil Reardon and everybody that does that class, they really spend a lot of time on water supplies and the issues that you could have with, how wells are constructed and surface water and things like that. I'm not going to get into all of the regulations, and we're not going to look at every single type of, water system here. I just put this up here. In the PMO, item 8R covers water supply. The bottom line is that the water has to be safe. You have to have enough of it to be able to do what you're doing. And then we need to make sure that we're protecting it from contamination. So anything we're using it for doesn't get back into the supply itself. Next slide. So the basic regulatory requirements, I talked about item 8R in the PMO, but what we're looking at in the grade A program is you have the PMO, and then you have the EPA manual of individual water supply systems. And I wanted to put a picture of I have manual of individual water supply systems from, I think my copy is from 1973. Chip Lindbergh actually gave it to me when I started with the state, 19 plus years ago. It was his copy. It has acid burns on top of it from sulfuric acid at the lab. It has coffee stains on it. It's, but I use it. I use it a lot. So, so those two cover the guidelines for water supply types, so groundwater and surface water. protecting the supply. And then, of course, the PMO itself then gets into the use of reclaimed water. And, reclaimed water being anything on the farm that you reclaim from typically a heat exchange process, like, the plate cooler. Sometimes there's free heaters, things like that. So, but that's all, that would be covered in the PMO. That's not going to be in that EPA manual. And then there's the EPA cross connection control manual. If you've never looked at this book, I highly suggest you look into this and read it and look at it. You can get it, just Google it and it'll come up. You can get it as a PDF. You don't have to pay for it. And it's very useful. And that's where you're going to find all the information about backflow preventers. It'll show you, basically teaches you about what is backflow, what is back pressure, what is all the physics behind all of that. So it's very informative and gives you a really good guidance on types of backflow preventers and where they need to be used. All right, go ahead, Donna. So let's talk about how you would go about evaluating a system. How many times have you gone out, you're getting ready to go out to a farm, you have to look at their water system that day. You're hoping for, one water line into the plate cooler and one water line out of the plate cooler going to maybe one storage tank. And you walk into the utility room and, it's a new facility and this is what you see. And it makes your head spin. So I'm going to just try to discuss one way to go about this. Certainly not the only way. You could take this procedure and turn it into something, that works for you. Certainly, grab it and improve it if you want. But, and like I said earlier, I'm not going to get into all the regulatory requirements for each type of system, but we're going to just try to give you a good base starting point for doing an evaluation on something like this. Next slide. So, before I begin, do you have a procedure for evaluating water systems? There's a difference. So I'm not necessarily here talking about when you go out to a farm during a rating or a check rating or something like that, and how you look at the system to determine compliance or not. I'm talking about basically understanding the system that's on the farm that you're responsible for doing the regulatory work on. Do you understand the flow of it? Where protection is required? What's the water supply type? What are all the guidelines for that? And do you document that? What I'm going to talk about is going to probably be really, really simple and probably overly simplified, but I'd be surprised to find out that, like, if 90% of everyone was actually documenting everything that they're looking at. Like I said, I've done a lot of work with a lot of folks on farms, and I'm guilty of it myself, just going out and just starting to, walk around and just look at things instead of actually writing stuff down. And that's what we're going to talk about. What do you do on a brand new facility versus a farm that you've been inspecting for years? A farm that you've been looking at for years, do you fully evaluate the water system every time you go out there? And honestly, is it even necessary to do that? I can say from when I did plant inspections and processing facilities, I didn't look at the same thing every time I went. You kind of break it up because you have to do an inspection every 90 days. And of course, for farms, every 6 months. And I didn't look at the same thing every time I went in there. You would always look at the very critical items, but you would try to make sure you were looking at all of the processes, during the year to make sure you were hitting that entire facility, but you didn't look at every single thing in detail every time. If you have a water system on a farm that you know pretty well and you've documented it, you're not going to necessarily review it in full detail every time. You're going to take a glance, make sure there's been no changes and things like that. But, but how would you know if there were any changes? if you don't do a full evaluation right from the start, how are you going to know? And, you know, I was thinking in my head, you could make a joke here that if you walk into the farm and there's, you know, typically a ton of cobwebs in one spot, and then all of a sudden there's bright shiny pipe right there, that obviously would be an indicator that there was a change. But how would you know if there was a change to the flow? You know, each system is definitely going to be unique, and that's, you know, I said in the beginning about things being complex, but no matter how complex they are, they all still have the same requirements. So we're going to be evaluating every system for proper construction, contamination sources, what's its final use, is there backflow prevention required, what type of bacteria testing is going to be required, and, you know, what frequency is that testing required at. And then in some cases, you're going to have a continuous disinfection system dependent on the system. So then, you know, what are the requirements for that? So before I go into, you know, what I consider a very basic and simple, you know, procedure for reviewing a system, I have to thank Neil Reardon. Neil's one of our farm rating officers. He's a dairy product specialist, and he always gives really good feedback if you ask him questions on things. And I reached out to him when I was working on this and said, you know, what do you do when you go on a farm? And, you know, he sent me a page of bullet points of things that, you know, how it would go basically from start to finish evaluating a water system. So I incorporated a lot of what he gave me into this. So I just wanted to give him a shout out on that. Next slide, Donna. So, you know, doing a water system evaluation, you know, where do you begin? And honestly, I'm going to tell you right from the beginning, if you have a really complex system and you want to understand the flow, my suggestion right off the bat is do not get yourself concerned with regulatory requirements right from the start. You need to break the system down into its core pieces. You know, it's so easy to go out onto a farm. We have this with new inspectors going into dairy processing facilities. You can get very overwhelmed by all the pipes. You know, what's the flow? Where does everything go? And if you don't break it down into its individual pieces, it's going to be very difficult to get a good sense of what that system does. I use the example here of, you know, are you read the directions and lay everything out person, or do you just grab stuff out of the box and try to figure out how to put it together? I used to be the person that just started pulling things out of the box and realized how much longer it took me to put things together. And I found out, you know, if I just take my time, break things down, that everything goes a lot faster and a lot smoother, and I have much less anxiety. I just put a tree stand together, my son and I took every part out. I read the directions. I laid all the bolts out onto the floor, all the pieces. He thought I was crazy, but we put it together very quickly. So it worked out very well. So you got to think, what kind of person are you? And, you know, how do you want to approach these things? Next slide, Donna. So first thing, sort out all the pieces. First thing I would do is identify the water source. And again, don't worry about evaluating it for compliance. Just identify it right off the bat. Do you have a groundwater source? What type of groundwater? Is it well, or is it a spring? Are you dealing with surface water? If you have multiple sources, which one is going to be the potable supply for the milk house? You know, this simple, just write this down in a notebook. I mean, this should be quick and easy. Next slide, Donna. Yeah, this slide. So before I go on though, when you're identifying sources, you have to make sure right off the bat though that you're making the proper identification. Sometimes it might not be all that straightforward. You know, you can go out and see a drilled well and say, yes, that's a drilled well. And that's easy. You can see a pond. Yes, that's a pond. That's easy. Something that's been coming up a lot lately, we're getting a lot of questions about surface water, and we're seeing some examples where we might have a shallow dug well located, you know, near a pond, or sometimes right on the bank of the pond. And, you know, that's most likely not a dug well. It's probably going to be considered a surface water supply. So, you know, that's where you have to, that's when you're identifying, this might be a situation where, you know, you need to give us a call and we can help you with this. You know, we can do some consulting, we can talk to FDA, maybe we could get the county or the state health department on the line and try to figure some of those things out. We can get that manual of water supplies out and review that. So don't let it become an issue where, you know, you're standing there on a rating and you're trying to decide what's your water source. So this is definitely something that we can help you out with. And I hope there's enough people in the audience that are old enough to understand that cartoon there. The old, is it rabbit season or is it duck season cartoon? Next slide, Donna. So again, super simple, make a list. Where's the water used? And I just made up, this is literally a made up example, obviously. So I'm on this farm and I identified that they had 2 wells, and I just made a simple list of what they're using each of those wells for. Really simple, but you know, how many of you have actually done this? You know, take the time, write it out. This is going to help you in the long run. Go ahead, Donna. So the next thing, I would just complete a simple flow diagram. And, you know, again, don't worry about the regulations. Don't worry about backflow prevention or any of that. Just get the flow onto paper so that you understand it. And this is basically from my example. You know, I just drew it out. This, you are going to have to trace the lines when you do this. You're going to have to walk along and see where everything connects in and, you know, where it branches off and goes to different components within the system. But if you write this all out on the paper, it's going to make your life a lot easier when you're looking at these systems. If you have a new installation or you know, pretty large facility, you know, ask the installer to get you a schematic. There's some installers out there that have produced some really good schematics on water systems that are very helpful. You know, I'm a visual person. I actually, you know, any of you that have ever asked me a question on something like this, I'm sure you probably know you've gotten a response back from me in an email or on a phone call saying, get me a drawing, you know, get me a diagram, get me a process and instrumentation drawing, because I need to see the flow, because it's, you know, just trying to talk through where the water is going or where a backflow preventer might be required or something like that. It's so much easier when you can visualize it on paper like this. Go ahead, Nana. So now you know the supply, you know where you're going to use it, and you have a basic flow diagram. Now this is where you can go back and you can apply your resources, right? You can apply all that knowledge that, you know, Neil and Chad and Rodney bestowed upon you when you went to the CIMI school, or where, you know, we discussed something at a CIMI update or something like that. You know, get your books out. Now you can go back and look at your supply. So now, you know, if you've got groundwater, you can look in the PMO, look in Appendix D. You'll find all the requirements for groundwater there, all the requirements for surface water. So for the different types of groundwater. So, you know, if you have a spring, what are the requirements for a spring? You know, you need to have things like diversion ditches and things like that. A drilled well, you know, is the casing above ground? Is the well cap tight? You know, no depressions around the well, things like that. This is the time now to check all that part. If you've got surface water, you know, has a sanitary survey been done? You know, what type of treatment is in place? You know, the filter, what type of disinfection you're using, chemical or UV, something like that. And then what's the monitoring? You know, it has to, there's testing and record keeping required when you have surface water. So, you know, what is all that in place? And this would be the time you can get all that, you know, onto paper as well. Go ahead, Donna. So then once you assess your supply, you make sure that that's all compliant. Now you can go back in and evaluate your system, right? So where are all these water pipes going? And, you know, you can take that diagram out that you made, and you can, on paper, figure out where you're going to need a backflow preventer. You know, is the correct backflow preventer being installed at the point of use? So, you know, if you've got a vacuum breaker type backflow preventer, you know, this is where you would evaluate. Are there any shutoff valves after that? You know, it's things like that. So, but you can do that on paper, really, and without even walking around too much. Just write in where you think you need it, and then go see where those backflow preventers are, or see if there's a spot where you have to have one installed. You know, you can look at on paper, are there any connections between potable and non-potable water? You know, piping configurations that allow tie-ins to emergency water, things like that. And then another big one is any of that water being reclaimed for use. And you know, you'll have to document that on your diagram. But if we go to the next slide, I can talk about this in more detail. So what I basically did here, and again, this is my made up example. You know, if I was out doing the inspection and I was taking the notes, and I might come back and say, all right, well, I have a drilled well. That's a 3-year bacteria test. There is reclaimed water in this system. So I made a note that I have to test that every 6 months, because I made a flow diagram and I know that that reclaimed water is going back to my pre-cooler, right? So we have recirculated cooling there. So we have to test that every 6 months. I need an RPZ between the pre-cooler and that reclaimed storage tank, because maybe I determined that, you know, it was a bottom feed tank with no overflow on it or something. So I determined that it needed a backflow preventer there. I checked the wash sink, there's an air gap, so I'm good to go. Hot water tank, it's potable water, it's all part of the system. I don't need any protection there. I have a hand wash sink, that's air gap because of the faucet, so I'm good to go. But then I noticed on all these hoses that I need to put hose bib vacuum breakers on there, because, you know, the operators are using those in different areas, and they're submerging them in buckets and things like that. So I need to make sure those are protected. I didn't want to get too far into the weeds on this example, and you know, water can get complex, but you know, this second well, I had it going to a radiant floor heat and then to a cap barn. And of course I wrote in there, ask the state what to do with this, right? Because we would probably end up getting some of those questions anyway. But I want to point out, if you've got that second well attached to the first well, you know, I discovered on this farm that there's only a ball valve there separating those two. If that's the case, then I have to make sure that that well is potable, right? And so we would have to test that and have record of that. Otherwise, you would have to disconnect that line, because we wouldn't have any record of that well being a potable supply. So next slide now. And then, you know, the same as breaking down, you know, once you've determined your, you know, like when we determine the supply type and we determine if we had a drilled well, then you can go to Appendix D and you can figure out what are all the requirements for a drilled well. And so what do I have to look at on that? It's the same thing with all the components. So in that example, we had a reclaimed water tank. Well, what's that water being used for? Does it require testing? You know, is it, you know, if it was just air gapped, filling at the top and there was an air gap and then that water was just going out to the cows for watering, we wouldn't be concerned with it, right? But if here in this case is being recirculated back to the plate cooler, so there's a lot more things we have to look at for that. And then that you can also find all that in Appendix D, and you can just break that down into what you have to look for. Treatment of surface water, this is a little bit of a repeat, you know, but again, those requirements are in Appendix D. You're going to have, that system's going to have to be, you have to review the monitoring for the system. So what are they going to do to test? How are they going to keep their records? Where are they going to keep their records? Are they actually doing the testing? You know, if you go to the farm and the chemical, you know, and the calendar is all filled out with all of the chlorine residue tests, but the test kit is covered in cobwebs, it's probably a good indication that they're not actually testing it. You know, how are they achieving their retention time with their chlorine? Are they using like a pressure tank or whatever? How did the installer figure all that out? I would ask that question. If they have a UV light system, what's their maintenance schedule on that? How often do they need to change the bulb? you know, those are the questions that need to be asked. Non-electric farms, you know, I didn't really put a lot in, you know, into this presentation, or I didn't put anything into this presentation about non-electrics, but you know, the one thing you have to be careful of is that when you're on a non-electric farm, they do use a lot of like gasoline and diesel motors for different things. So how are they getting that water out of those wells? And this would go with any well, really. We have to protect them all from, you know, fuels like gas and oil and diesel and things like that. But especially in non-electric farms, because we do see a lot of those types of engines used for pumping the water. And, you know, again, go to Google because the internet doesn't lie, but something like, I think it's 1 quart of oil or 1 quart of gasoline or something can contaminate up to like 1 million gallons of groundwater and drinking water. So definitely something we need to keep an eye on. Next slide, Don. So, you know, take your complex systems, break everything down to its core. And that sounds pretty easy and simple, but you know, it's going to take you some time. This isn't something that I would expect somebody to do every time they go out to a farm. And I do understand that, you know, if you are a field inspector, you probably have a lot of farms, you know, assigned to you. So this isn't going to be an easy task, but I think it might be worth your time. And then you'll know going forward, you know, what is the flow? Have any changes been made? And I think it'll help you out if you take the time to do this exercise. But once you've done that and you sketched everything out, I would finalize it. You know, I would take all your drafts and all your notes, and I would finalize a drawing, and I would put it in a binder, and I would keep it in the farm or keep it with your files or something like that, so that you have that. You know, it's kind of the same thing with like our equipment applications. You know, we consider them to be, you know, the system as designed. And then if there are any changes made, you could always go back to those applications and to the information that was submitted, and you'll know what changed. You'll know how it was originally and what the original design was. In addition to all those sketches, you know, another thing some people have done in the past is take pictures or take a roll of tape and a Sharpie marker and put arrows on the lines and to help you know where's the flow. You know, take pictures of what are the positions for some of those water valves on the plate coolers for when you're in milking mode versus when you're in washing mode. So, and I've seen that on farms. You know, you'll see somebody will write milk and there'll be an arrow, they'll write wash and there's an arrow, and that'll tell you where the valves need to be. So I really think that taking the time to do an exercise like this, I think is really going to help you in the long run. And like I said, having that as design documentation, you know, if there aren't enough cobwebs on the farm to indicate, you know, when something's brand new, then it might help you if you have the paperwork right in front of you. So next slide, which is the end. That's all I have. So thank you.